Thanks, Anne, and thank you for the invitation to come to Melbourne today and to reflect on our programs at the museum in Shepparton. I've put my presentation together fairly quickly, but it's been great to reflect on some of the intuitive work that we do at the museum that's really grown over the last 7 years or so. I have put together a bit of a 10-point plan for you. I'm just going to work about the characters that our programs tend to have. But in terms of audiences, this is the natural audience of Shepparton Art Museum. This is Margaret and John Laurie. John was president of our Friends Association for about 10 years. He's retired now. We also, like most of Australia, have an ageing population. And these are the people that come to not everything, but nearly everything. However, the demographic of Shepparton is changing really dramatically. This is a photograph of a school tour I took about 3 weeks ago. It was a small regional primary school, which had a total of 60 students, and they all came to the museum on this particular day. 80% were from non-English speaking backgrounds. So you can see that the friends of tomorrow are going to look very different to what they do today. So there's a certain aspect of the audiences at the museum which is going to change naturally. But at the time I started at the museum 7 years ago, really the only people engaging were the Margaret and John Lauries of Shepparton, together with some primary and secondary schools. There was no one else coming. So we started to think about how do we get audiences to come. And I'm going to talk about how we have, because we have brought in a range of diverse audiences into the museum. But to get to the answer to that question, we really needed to interrogate the question of why we would want to. I mean, we have a large population of over 60s in Shepparton. They're engaged, they love art, they're growing. Could we not just focus on them? Why do we as an organisation see ourselves in the space of needing to attract diverse audiences? Having read the demographic profile of Shepparton back then and again recently, there is a sense of the demographics of the museum visitation should marry in some way with that of the community, but that's not the reason really in and of itself. And I guess the answers that my team came to were really around the role of the museum in the community and reinstating, if it needed to be reinstated, that the role of the art museum is bigger than the art museum itself. So the mission or vision for Shepparton Art Museum, which is embedded in our brand, is to enrich the lives of people through visual art experiences. So that's not about art for art's sake. That's really about the well-being of our community. So the whys, I'm not going to talk a lot about it today, but the whys are about social inclusion, the health of individuals, and the vibrancy of Shepparton as a place to live. But why would they want to come? And I guess I just wanted to look at kind of thinking a bit laterally about this question of why and trying to position yourself in someone who's not a non-attending visitor. So, and we've got a large refugee community in Shepparton, for example, and a very diverse migrant group. But, you know, why would they come into a museum in their region that is Eurocentric, run by rate collectors, which no one there particularly looks like them necessarily. So if I'm a 17-year-old Congolese girl walking past the front of my museum, what on earth would I go in there for? Nobody speaks the language that I do. No one looks like me. No one has my background, and I'm not engaged in art anyway. So, and I think once you start to think about that question, it just began to unlock some of the how to go about things for us with the museum. This is a work by Richard Lure, which is in our collection, and I thought it was worth just popping in there, aside from being a great work, and I know you all like looking at art. It shows, it's clearly made by someone at the centre who's trying to use the first person to position a statement about politics in Australia. It's not made by refugee artists. There was another work in this show with a similar 1950s school map which said, "Fuck off, we're full." And while we could have looked at acquiring that for our collection, the irony would not have been understood by our audiences at all. They would have seen it as a genuine statement, sadly. So it just goes to the question I think that I'm trying to pose of position yourself from the perspective of the audience you're trying to engage with to unlock how to go about it. So this is my 10-point plan, which I hope I've managed to present in sequence throughout the rest of my talk. Meet a need. Have a relationship people, create doing programs, go and find them. Let the community devise the program with you or for you. Employ diverse people. Some people have talked about that. Find out what they think and design rolling programs. Partner with other organisations whenever possible and put collections to work. And Anne's asked me to talk about collections, so I'm going to not disappoint you, Anne, and do that today. I'm just going to grab a drink of water. This is a very old image. This is the first cultural development program we ever began at SAM. It's called the Afghani Sewing Project. It's from 2007. And we learnt a lot on the run with this program. So I went and met the CEO of our local ethnic council to learn more about the different cultural groups that weren't coming to Shepparton Art Museum, and he taught me a lot about what was going on in the region. And I learnt about this newly arrived emerging Afghan community. At that time there were 7 Afghan families. And he also put me in touch with a number of cultural leaders for some of the new emerging ethnic groups in Shepparton, who I went and met and interviewed about their experiences of arriving in Shepparton. And I met a young Congolese man, and I said, so, what happens when you get off the plane at Tullamarine, and does someone greet you? Like, how is that organised? How do you find yourself settled into a regional city? And what does the council do for you? Are there any services that we provide? And he said to me, no, the council doesn't do anything. It's all aid agencies. So someone will come down in a car and picked him up and his family and brought him to Shepparton to temporary accommodation. They then start looking for permanent accommodation and go on to try and find furniture and meet other essential needs, and then link them up with literacy and other kinds of programs to get them into work. I said, but what does the council do? And he said, well, they haven't done anything. We've never met anyone from the council. And then he stopped for a minute and he said, oh no, they gave us some soccer balls. And that's a whole community of Congolese people living in Greater Shepparton, which spans about, 2,000, 3,000 people now. So I was a bit taken aback by that. And I devised from those meetings this project. There's another backstory to this, which is a nice story. I'll try and tell it quickly. But on the right over here, the lady with the blonde hair and the big glasses, that's Kate Durham. Kate Durham smuggled herself onto Nauru and made a documentary for the BBC about Afghan people detained on Nauru. And she was presenting an exhibition with the gallery of portraits that she'd painted of people who drowned when the Civex went down. And in the exhibition, she included some ephemeral material from a letter writing campaign which she'd established across Australia. And her husband's Julian Burnside, quite well-known QC, who we also began a relationship with at that time. But at the opening of this event back in 2007, we showed some of the letters that she had written to people detained in Nauru. And we had a local young Afghan boy open the exhibition, and the Afghan community, which was around, as I said, 10 families or so at that time, came for the first time to the gallery. And what happened at the opening is they're standing around this cabinet, and there was this enormous amount of excitement, and we managed to get a translator to explain that they had identified their letters and letters from their family in the exhibition from when they had been detained in Nauru, written to Australians prior to their arrival. But also during that time that Kate was on Nauru, she smuggled out, if you like, some embroidered materials that the women had, some of the women had made, very finely detailed text on cloth. And there was a beautiful piece in this cabinet which said, "Home Sweet Nauru," which had been embroidered in English with the finest thread in the finest cotton you could possibly imagine. And that work was really what began a year-long project for Sam, and a long journey into diversifying our audiences at the museum. We started off with about 10 women in a room with no translator, because there were none in Shepparton, and myself and my staff trying to cobble together some way of connecting with these people who had never met an Australian person before that day. And this was one of our final sessions with, you can see, around 40 participants in the program. We had, as I said, there were very few skills in our community at that time, so we found a need. These women had no safe female-only spaces that their husbands had sanctioned that they could meet in, so the gallery became that. And they didn't necessarily know each other, these families coming to Shepparton, so they needed to find their community, and this became a place that we were able to offer it to. So, yeah, anyway, I'll move on. You need to actually have, and this is one of the things that came out of this project, you need to have people with the time to have relationships. It's really through finding relationships and connecting with individuals in your institution that we've been able to bring diverse audiences into SAM. I don't have the time. I can't go to the programs, and you need people on the ground to be doing that, either on staff or through the community that you're bringing to your museum. So a lot of our programs, they may be specific to a particular cultural group, but we try and engage mainstream audiences within that program to connect people together. This is Angie Rusi and Rhonda Crescentho, two of our staff. Angie is our cultural development worker. 2 days a week delivers most of these programs. And the work that she does is probably the volume of about 15 people. She achieves it through partnership and coordinating with partnership with other organisations. Create doing programs. So I think the thing is, you can't kind of decide that there's a particular group of people you want to reach out to and, or we'll put an exhibition on that's about that culture. People really want to participate and have a reason to be in your institution. They're not going to come just if you provide cultural content that might relate in some way to their background. And we know from these stats from the Australia Council that 1 in 4 Australians are engaging in craft in some way. And they're highly attended. So to have craft-based doing programs has been a way of bringing people in for us. The People Talking to People program has evolved over the last few years. It's a partnership with Goulburn Ovens TAFE. We partner with a lot of community agencies to deliver specific programs. So the idea with the People Talking program is to use the collection and artists in our workshop room to develop a language program. It is, again, mainstream audiences connecting with English as a second language students to talk about art and learn about each other through using art as a catalyst for conversation. Yeah, and this is an image from one of the programs. There there are some other images about people talking program, I'm sure, coming up. The golden age of colour prints. I wanted to talk a little bit, use this as an example of how to squeeze the most out of the opportunities that your exhibition program provides you, and developing a community-driven public program. So this was an exhibition of 200 prints from the 1780 to 1800s Japanese woodblock prints, master print works that we brought to Shepparton earlier in the year. But when we were setting out to develop the public program, we really saw it as a catalyst for connecting with a group in our community who we did not know, who were completely invisible to us, and we wanted to find out who they were and what they were up to and what their skills base were, and whether there was any scope that they might be interested in visual art programming or connecting with a wider audience through the museum. Don't bother advertising. Really, if you're wanting to connect, what we've found at SAM, if you want to connect with a specific group of people, particularly a cultural or language group within your community, you don't advertise, not even in their language. You actually need to meet them and connect with them, and that goes back to that people, having people on your team. It's great to get stories in the age, but they're for your mainstream audience that are already engaged in the visual arts, not for your marginalised groups. Go and find them. For some reason this image is upside down, and I'm wondering if my presentation's been a bit corrupted somehow. This fellow, all we knew was the Japanese businesses in town, and there was a sushi bar, and this was the chef. So we went up to the sushi bar and went and had dinner there one night and asked to meet the chef and said, you know what, we're bringing this amazing exhibition to Shepparton, and we'd like to talk to you about what it's like being Japanese in Shepparton, and turned out he was a painter. And it was the first connection in, I guess, to the Japanese community. We also knew there was a Japanese language teacher at one of the local Catholic schools, so we went and knocked on her door, and she turned out to be quite a leader within the Japanese community in Shepparton. It's a small community, but nonetheless there were some enormous skills in the community that we were able to develop a program around. We took some cues from the work, and we employed a really diverse range of people. So a number of the works depict images of famous actors from the Kabuki theatre. We had a local puppeteer that we knew from the region who developed a puppet play based on the Kabuki theatre, and then we created opportunities for people to come in and make their own Kabuki puppets as part of our program. This is Yuko on the left, who's the Japanese language teacher, and she really opened the doors to the whole Japanese community with us, sat down with our team and devised the whole cultural program. And it was massive, absolutely massive. This lady on the right, whose name I can't remember, didn't actually speak English, but she was a master of tea ceremony. And so we were able to provide the opportunity to participate in very formal tea ceremony using collection tea bowls. And and there she is teaching some traditional crafts as well as part of our program. So we did a kind of skills assessment of what skills were in the community, and then tried to connect them to the artwork in the show, if that makes sense. And then we employed the Japanese community to deliver the program for us. We also developed a tea ceremony opportunity for our councillors, and so it was the first time the Japanese community had ever met their council, and the councillors participated in a formal tea ceremony as part of the program. So we kind of wove in these opportunities for the community to be more visible within their community. Maximise any local connection. So we needed to develop a gala dinner, and I knew that there was a fabulous restaurant in Melbourne called Taxi, which was meant to be one of the best Japanese restaurants in Melbourne. It just so happened that their executive chef was a Shepparton lad, and so we brought him back to this gala dinner, and it created a great amount of media interest, I guess, to bring this local lad back to Shepparton to celebrate this event, which was a high price ticketed event, but a way again of connecting back to the region why this exhibition was here. Okay, our public program and education, it's just cutting off a little bit at the moment. So we developed during our closure, when we were undertaking our renovations, a 6-month Artist in School program, and we just targeted one school, and we put artists in that school, and we actually took a collection cabinet out there and about 50 artworks and installed them in the school. And the artworks in the school were by the artists who were working with the kids in the school. And it became this incredible whole of community program. And we reached a lot of people through that program. Not something we could necessarily manage when we're open and fully functioning all the time, because it was fairly resource heavy. But from that, we developed it up for this year into another program which was manageable, which was a 4-week program alongside the Japanese exhibition. So we have this fabulous collection of Australian ceramics in Shepparton. It's the largest that exists. So we curated a special display looking at the influence of Japanese potters on Australian ceramics and the history of that in our collection galleries, and we developed up a literacy and personal growth program alongside the print exhibition for, I think we had 4 schools participating in this 4-week program. So the kids actually dug up clay on the school grounds, and then they worked that, made tea bowls and participated in formal tea ceremony, came and saw the Japanese print exhibition as well. And alongside that, they were doing this literature program in their English class, so really trying to embed it in a whole range of different curriculums, not just the visual art curriculum. This incredible story, beautiful story called A Single Shard, which is about an impoverished Korean boy who longs to be a potter. And so they read this book, made their own tea bowls, participated in the tea ceremony with the bowls that they'd made, and were engaging with the collection and the exhibition program at the same time. So that kind of whole of institution programming, if you like. They also met with their Japanese community through this program as well. And there they are making tea bowls in our workshop room, one of the schools. So find out what they think. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about our Indigenous programs. We've run quite a lot of different programs with the Aboriginal community in Shepparton, and I think the thing is it's to be able to gather information and work intuitively and redesign different programs as you go. So not all programs necessarily are rolling. They might be with a similar target audience, but we develop them in different ways. So this actually began out of a Museum Victoria touring exhibition which we brought to Shepparton many years ago, and there was a basket in this exhibition which the staff recognised as being techniques specific to the region in Shepparton. And in conversation with the Aboriginal community, we began to realise that there was a loss of knowledge around how to actually undertake this particular form of basket weaving, which had gone up to Arnhem Land with the daughter of a missionary and been practised in that region. But in the region it was from, in Barma region, we didn't know how to produce baskets like this anymore. So we spent nearly 2 years looking for a trainer who could teach the community how to engage in basket weaving. That was about 5 years ago. So from that, we have developed a large number of programs with our Aboriginal community, not only in weaving but in a whole range of other media as well. Some alongside exhibitions, some standing on their own ground through partnerships with different organisations. And now we're at a point where we're actually working with the Aboriginal community to deliver programs for SAM. We've been doing that for a while, but there's more autonomy heading into the future. So through our Indigenous Ceramic Art Award, which is a national award, we've going into its 4th incarnation next year. We've had a cultural program, generally bringing artists to Shepparton to deliver programs, and this is some images of the program last year. We employed a local Aboriginal woman, Eva Ponting, to actually coordinate this program for us last time it was delivered. And part of the program, again, is always employing local people to try and deliver and match skills to programs. Yeah, look at my PowerPoint has kind of skewed itself a little bit. But yeah, partnering with other organisations whenever possible. So I've just created a list of some that came to mind this morning when I was writing this, of the organisations we're partnering with. We've done a large project with Koori Heritage Trust a few years ago where we brought artefacts and collection objects from the Trust to Shepparton and then worked with the Aboriginal community to show local artists' work alongside artefacts that had never been returned to the site that they were from. And from that then, a year later, published a book about the artists that exhibited in that exhibition. So it's just constantly, I guess, identifying people, working out where the skills and interest areas are, and then developing programs alongside that. So it's not like, well, you've done one community, you can kind of go on to the next. I think that's maybe the point I wanted to make here about SAM's commitment to its Aboriginal community. And next year, under the stewardship of Nicky Compton, who's here today, the local Aboriginal community in Shepparton will be entirely defining, designing, running the whole of the Aboriginal program for the Indigenous Ceramic Art Award. So the museum's just completely stepping out of responsibility for delivering that program, and the Aboriginal community will be partnering with us through Gallery Kyella to do all of that. So we're really pleased that we're at that point. I guess part of the award and of the vision of one of our funders was that we would have a Hermannsburg in Shepparton, and I've been saying for the last 6 years there's only one Aboriginal potter in Shepparton, and perhaps this is a misguided vision, except I'm wrong, and as we speak the Aboriginal community is establishing a ceramic studio and is intending on entering works for the not the first time, because we've had a couple of local people submit work, but certainly there'll be a large number more works coming into the next award. So, you know, you get proven wrong along the way. Collections. We've got a major gap in our collection, and I guess I just wanted to make the point that if you've got major gaps, you need to try and fill them, obviously, particularly when they relate to a cultural group of significance in your region. But as an institution, you know, we need to tell the stories of our region. If we haven't got the work, it's pretty difficult to do that. This is a work by Lynn Onus. Please excuse that there's no credit on some of these images. So when we were curating the exhibitions for the opening of the museum last year, the curator and I decided we were just going to put a dotted line on one entire wall in our landscape gallery and put a note saying, this is where the Lynn Onus should be, but we don't have it. We managed to find a collector and donor who had a work that they were prepared to loan, so we hung this, albeit in our collection gallery, as a kind of wishful thinking. But we were fortunate that 12 months later he announced he would gift it to us. So it was about building the case. It's not ours yet, but it will be one day. Announce and build that case around why key people in your community in different cultural groups should be represented in your collections. And this is the donor, Carrillo Gantner. This exhibition is an exhibition I curated earlier in the year and we published on, and my cultural development worker Angie took me aside and gave me a really good talking to, and she said, Kirsten, you realise you're bringing 70 artworks from everywhere in Australia except Victoria to Yorta Yorta country. How do you think that's going to be received, and what are you doing about connecting with the local Aboriginal community? And it was a really valid point she made, and I had that conversation with Carrillo at the time, that just because it's Aboriginal work, don't expect the Aboriginal community are going to want to look at it. You really do need to, again, go to that question of why. Why would people want to come into your organisation, or why would they want to see that show? So with Angie and again with the support of Nicholas and others, we developed a way of providing an in to this exhibition. The only work from our region in the show was the Lynn Onus, and so the position of that work in the curation of the show was quite important. It needed to be up front and central. We also decided to open the exhibition a day earlier just for the Aboriginal community, and we invited Nicholas, as an Eastern Arrernte man who'd grown up in Victoria, to come and take some of the Aboriginal artists and elders through the show to see the works. I also met with Aboriginal elders and showed them all the artworks that would be presented in the exhibition, and we had a conversation around protocol and the bringing of artefacts from other places to this region. And that process was really important, I think, to engaging with that audience. And then, this is Carrillo. Oh, what a sweetheart. Look, he took that commentary really well around being mindful of how his collection would be sitting in the community which he was gifting it to. These are the kinds of works. This is an Emily Konawara work that he was collecting. So very different to the kind of works that we see in southeastern Australia. So we didn't have a Linonis, but we had Tiraki, his son, and so we brought him up to sing a beautiful aria from Deborah Cheatham's opera Pecan Summer. And we also, this is a poor photo down the bottom, but we invited the Aboriginal community to have an exhibition alongside the Gantner show at the entrance to the museum and through the corridors of the building. And that I think went a long way to stepping over what could have been a great barrier and rift to the Aboriginal community actually using this collection for professional development purposes into the future, had we not done that. Put the collections to work. So more images from people talking, engaging with the artwork. So this is really just an icebreaker program which Angie ran at the beginning of one of the programs, inviting members of the group to talk about the artwork but actually kind of act out what they saw going on in them, and some fabulous stories came out of these interactions. The work behind Cole and Itaf is a Longstaff work about the Spanish Inquisition, so there's lots of rich material there which the group could then take back into their language program. A missing slide. Another, again from the same program, our People Talking program, women engaging and talking about the collections and talking about motherhood and growing old and age and all those kind of very real things that we realise when we begin these programs we're all much more the same than we are different, and these artworks provide the conduit to finding those connections for people. Bringing artists to connect with our diverse audiences is a key way that we do it. And through the Drawing Wall commissions, which is a large, 14 metre long by 3.5, 4 metre high wall in a public building that we're part of. But one way to make sure that, that 17-year-old Congolese girl comes in is to depict her in a work. Pretty base, and if it's a good experience, then hopefully they'll come back. So Richard Lure and the Drawing Wall project is about bringing artists to Shepparton to make work of and about the region. Nicky Compton is another artist who we've commissioned to make work of and about the region, and it goes back to the comments I was making about Linonis and not having that in the collection. We want great Australian artists to make work of and about Shepparton and the people that live there and the issues that we're facing. And one way to make sure that happens and make sure that we're part of the narratives in Australian art and national narratives generally is to commission people to write or make art about and of our region. And so that's part of our collection program. A recent acquisition through the Robert Seltzer Fund. This is a work by Tony Elbert, which was made in response to an incident that happened in Sydney, where four boys stole a car and they hit a pedestrian, and the police opened fire on them, and two of the boys were injured and hospitalised. And there were big riots around this, and some Aboriginal men came out and painted targets on their chest and protested about the treatment of the police. And we have the largest Aboriginal population in Victoria outside of Melbourne, in Shepparton, and it just provides a conduit to talking about issues in our community, and they're really powerful, wonderfully strong, positive images of young Aboriginal men, and it will find a usefulness not only in our programs now, but I think long into the future with our collections. Some other works, Frederick McCubbin and Christian Thompson's work, again, not of and about our region specifically, but providing a conduit to talking about settlement and the history of our region and opening up the discussion around reconciliation, which is really important for us to continue to engage with as a cultural institution, but generally as a community in Shepparton. And for some reason my last slide is, again, defunct itself, but look, I'm not a big fan of flowcharts. Really, I think I said community, collections, programs, exhibitions, and they don't necessarily go like that, they go like that, as you probably all know. And I think that's probably enough from me. Thank you.